Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm Mackelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 61 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by Jeor Mormont. Today we're discussing chapter 60 of A Game of Thrones. Apparently I've forgotten the name of the book. A Game of Thrones, John 8.
You haven't had to say that very much, so, you know. So we're going to chat about the chapter, and we're going to try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully, we're going to provide you with some entertainment while we do those things.
We will summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They'll be handy for you if you are not reading along with us. They'll be handy for you anyway, but if you're not reading along, they're essential reading. How are you?
Okay. Pretty beat.
I'm beat too.
I don't know. It's just been like a stretch of long weeks, it feels like.
I know what you mean. The we're hot foot. We have usually we have a week's worth of things to talk about, but we just recorded the 1 year anniversary special yesterday, so
right.
Which was very illuminating. A couple of things that were illuminated by doing that. One was how little we've improved. And the other one was how reliant I am on the script, even for the things that I say every single week.
Yeah, that was surprising. I was surprised how tripped up you got by that.
It's incredible. I mean, I say those things every week, but I mean, the script is there in front of me, and I don't even glance at it. I didn't think, but take the script away, and I'm like, hello, my name is, I don't know.
You're like Ron Burgundy. Write down anything on the script, and you'll just say it.
So yeah, so I hope the listeners enjoy that, because it was kind of fun to do. What was comical to me about it was the fact that we were kind of intending to talk over it with our humorous observations about how rubbish we were.
Right. Yeah.
But we ended up listening to it and like being engaged by it and be like, oh, that was very interesting.
Yeah, it was not as bad as I was anticipating. I kind of wish it would be a little worse. One, it would have been funnier. Two, it would have showed how much better we've gotten.
True. Oh, well. All right. So let's get down, in the absence of anything humorous to say, let's get down to business with a quick recap of what Jon was up to last time we saw him. Last we saw Jon, he was overreacting to Alliser Thorne's provocations after learning of Ned's arrest in King's Landing. He was banished to a cell, but was woken in the night by Ghost. The two of them found the dead body of Othor had woken in the night and was trying to murder Lord Commander Mormont. The two fought, as in Jon and Ghost, fought against and defeated Othor at some expense. They set him on fire, but burned Jon's hand badly in so doing, and that appeared to do the trick. Mackelly, why don't we give them the summary of this chapter?
All right. Well, Jon and Lord Commander Mormont discussed the aftermath of this white attack that you just referred to. Jon's burns on his hands are worse than he had realized during all the chaos, but Maester Aemon thinks his right hand will fully recover, apart from some scars. Jon didn't tell Mormont that he's dreamt about his fight with the reanimated Othor, but in his dreams the corpse has his father Ned's face. Jon doesn't know what that could mean, but he doesn't like it.
Who wants to dream of fighting the reanimated corpses of anyone?
Right.
Regardless of their face. Mormont is thankful that there were only two whites, but can feel that more are coming, a feeling shared by Maester Aemon. He fears a winter like none seen before is headed their way. Jon has received word of a raven arriving and asks Mormont for news of his father and sisters. The Lord Commander says that there is none. The news was of Sir Barristan Selmy's dismissal and the raising of Sandor Clegane to the King's Guard. Jon thinks that with Selmy gone, there's little hope that Mormont's letter will be heeded.
Mormont tells Jon that there is no further news of his family, but Jon already knows this to be a lie, as he received this information on the down low from Sam. Mormont presents Jon with a sword, which changes the subject from the news of his family. The sword has been rebuilt after the fire. It's a Valyrian steel blade, but the pommel has been rebuilt. The Mormont bear has been replaced by a Stark direwolf, It's big, and Mormont takes the opportunity to point out that it will take a man to wield it. He implies that Jon ain't there yet, but he needs to be.
Mormont has more good news for Jon. He's sent Alliser Thorne to King's Landing with the hand of Jafar Flowers. Mormont brings Jon back to Earth by demanding his supper. Jon leaves and his friends crowd around to see the new sword. They're excited for him, but he's still haunted by the terror of fighting Othor. Jeremy Riker and 4 other men were killed bringing down Jafar Flowers.
Later, Sam visits Jon, who assumes that Tarly wants to see the sword, but Maester Aemon has summoned Jon. The Maester is feeding his ravens, but wants to talk to Jon about his vows generally. He explains that the reason men vow not to wed and have children is because love is the one thing that can trump honor and duty. The Night's Watch have to be fully committed, but everyone there is a son, a brother. The vows don't remove all family loyalty.
Aemon says that the day must come to everyone to choose between family and duty, and only the very few can do their duty under that choice. Jon doesn't think that Aemon understands, but the old man says that his own vows had been tested 3 times, the 3rd time quite recently, when he was too old to act anyway, but it didn't make the pain of his choice any less.
Aemon recounts how ravens brought news of the destruction of his house with his brother's descendants horribly slain. Jon realizes who Aemon might be, and the Maester confirms that his father was King Maekar Targaryen and his brother King Aegon. Jon is suitably impressed.
Yes, who wouldn't be? So
Right.
Aemon is a Targaryen.
He is Aemon Targaryen.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's right. Even if you're in your 90s, receiving those ravens must have been very hard.
Yeah, absolutely. When we get to that section in the chapter, I wonder, he mentions, several things, and I wonder what specific events he's talking about. But
the 3?
No, I mean, he talks about, ruin of his house, death of his kin. Well, that death part's pretty obvious. The disgrace and the desolation, and seems like some of that he's referring to Robert's rebellion and the usurping of the Targaryen throne, but some of it also, like the disgrace, might come from Aerys' actions in general as the Mad King.
I wondered if it might also be Rhaegar's kidnapping of Lyanna.
Right?
Well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, things like that.
Yeah.
But then he says some things in amongst all that conflict with that assumption a little bit, but we'll get there when we get there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So again, I think we've noticed this before. The Jon chapters tend to be in sort of 3 acts. So we have this sort of the initial interaction with him and Mormont, who are sort of like, I think they lived through something together, and that's formed a tighter bond between them.
Yeah.
Then his sort of like hanging out with his buddies, and
Right.
then there's his interaction with Maester Aemon at the end.
Yeah, you're right, because a lot of the chapters don't have that kind of 3-act structure. It's just like Sansa's chapter when she was in the throne room was just her in the throne room watching the scene unfold. There wasn't 3 very distinct acts like we've been getting with these Jon chapters.
Yeah, I think partly, no disrespect to Jon, I think generally speaking, what goes on at the Wall is just not as interesting. Now, sure, reanimated corpses, that's a little bit more interesting. Things are happening, but it's kind of like, the corpse reanimated and he fought it and killed it. It's like, you could have said that in one sentence. Yeah. It would have been kind of, you needed to write a chapter around it, but so I think he has to sort of like build this up a little bit into this sort of like mini story each time, just to keep the interest.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but so Mormont obviously is grateful to Jon for saving his life. It goes without saying.
Yep.
But he's given him quite the gift here.
He sure has.
This is the Mormont's family sword that they've had for 5 centuries. Yeah?
Right. I was thinking maybe like a promotion or like a weekend's vacation to Molestown,
or clemency for the fact I was about to execute you for what you did earlier,
Right.
Because
now you're just back to even par here. Right,
exactly. Yeah. But he actually says, we didn't mention this in the summary, but he actually says that, so the sword was his. He gave it to his son Jorah, who, when Jorah fled to Essos, he left the sword behind. And I think we've mentioned this before, that the Mormont family is very girl heavy.
Right.
Now.
Yeah.
It's the Lord of the Mormonts is Jeor's sister.
Yep. And
she only has daughters.
Yep.
Right. So there's literally nobody who can wield the thing because it's huge.
It is, he says it's half a foot longer than the sword he's used to wielding. So.
Right. What he actually says was that he was so ashamed of getting, so his sister sent the sword to him so it could get some use. But he was so ashamed of the fact that his son had disgraced the family name that he sort of stuffed it away and forgot about it. And it was only when the fire burned down his apartment that it sort of revealed itself, because wherever it was, everything around it burned, leaving just the Valyrian blade behind.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, he could have remade it himself. I mean, just kept the blade and maybe remade the pommel and stuff so that it didn't remind him so much of what his son did, Well,
that's true. That's true. I mean,
maybe when he saw it after they finished fixing it up for Jon, he was like, it doesn't look anything like my old sword. I think I could live with this now.
So another thing we skipped over is that another aspect of the story going on at the Wall is this continued absence of Benjen Stark.
Yeah.
And Mormont reports that the last two rangers who were out looking for him have returned with no news.
Yeah, and we missed, I don't recall us hearing about this latest searching party. I'm guessing that they went out because they found those two whites. They went out to see if maybe Benjen's body or any of the other guys' body that were out there with them
was walking around.
Yeah, or at least laying around. But the two guys are Dywyn and Hake, and Dywyn was the old ranger who went with Jon and Sam to say their vows, and then after they said their vows, he felt something off was in the woods, and that's when Ghost showed up with what's his name, Jafar Flowers' hand. And then the other guy is Hake, and he's the steward who went with Mormont to go see the bodies. He was there during the whole inspection scene. So that's who those two guys were. But they didn't find anything. So still no news on Benjen.
Yeah, but only two whites, only two reanimated corpses. But Mormont says to Jon, I don't feel that's the end of it. My old bones tell me that there's more of those coming, and that this is going to be a winter like no one's remembered before. And he also references the fact that they should have remembered. He says that at one point, they should have remembered. The Night's Watch has been around for 8,000 years, and in there, clearly he was saying that in their records there was talk of whites. And so, because he's actually talking about killing them with fire, that was the way to kill them.
Yeah, and that I guess that he had forgotten that you would kill a white with fire.
Well, I mean, honestly, if you have 8,000 years of history to read, even focused history just on the Night's Watch, that's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, you got to sift through a lot of uninteresting information to get to kill whites with fire. Okay.
That being said, if you were reading the 8,000 year history of the Night's Watch, the bit where the dead rose and fought you would really stand out.
It would, yeah. It should definitely be in the highlighted version of the information. But Mormont says that
amidst sort of like hundreds of pages of it's really cold. God, it's really cold.
Mormont says that this winter that's coming is going to be worse than anything that anyone has ever experienced. And I wondered if he was including the long night in that, because we learned from Old Nan in one of the early Bran chapters that the long night, the winter lasted for a generation. So that's a long time. If it's worse than that, they're really in for a serious mess here.
Yeah. I definitely think it's destined to be on par with it.
Seems like it. Seems like that's what we're being set up for here.
Yeah. So So the Raven, according to Mormont, the Raven only brought word that Barristan Selmy had been fired from his job, Gregor Clegane had been elevated to the Kingsguard, and that some idiot had sent gold cloaks to arrest Barristan Selmy, which ended predictably with dead gold cloaks and no Barristan Selmy.
Yeah. What idiot could that have been? I feel like we might know, might have recalled saying, "What an idiot! Who's going to send gold cloaks after Barristan Selmy?" Yeah, but like you said, that's all he admits to being in the letter. Jon knows he's holding back information from him, so we don't know. There might have been other news that he doesn't want to reveal to Jon, but this is the part he does reveal to him anyway. Yeah. And then Mormont says, he's frustrated. He says, "There's white shadows in the woods, unquiet dead in the halls, and a boy sits the Iron Throne." But from the Night's Watch perspective, I'm not sure exactly how much it would really matter whether Robert was on the throne or Joffrey was on the throne. I don't know that Joffrey would have done anything. I mean, I don't know that Robert would have done anything more than just empty out more of the dungeons,
Yeah.
I don't know that he's going to march an army up there.
We've had this discussion before but then again, Alliser Thorne is going down there, and when he dumps that hand on the table and it starts crawling around by itself, that might get the people's attention. Now, we haven't actually seen that happen, yes? I mean, as far as we know, the hand has lain still, but it's not decomposing, so it has that going for it.
Right. Yeah, I wondered if that hand would do any good. I guess if it does start crawling around, if it starts acting like Thing, that probably would get some attention. But if he just brings him a hand in a jar,
I was trying to remember what character it was from the Addams Family. Thing, of course, yeah. What Alliser Thorne needs to do is do a bit of a mummer's farce. He needs to get it out and then grab it to his throat.
That's the ticket. They should practice that before he leaves. But if that,
I could just see Alliser Thorne doing that.
Yeah, he seems like the type, certainly. But if it just sits there in a jar, I just don't know that Joff's going to be the kind to get too worked up about a hand in a jar, Nor is Cersei.
Yeah, a jar is the worst thing to put it in, because that looks like you've intentionally preserved it.
Right, yeah.
What you need to do is just out of your pocket, look, there it is. Not decomposed, I promise.
True.
Just pop outside, see if you see a guy with no hand. So I was interested to note that Mormont was so clued into the workings of the realm. Because that's quite a small footnote to what's going on in King's Landing, the Barristan Selmy thing.
Yeah.
And yet he got notified of it. So it's interesting how clued in he is, even though the Night's Watch, eschew any involvement in the workings of the realm.
Yeah.
They stay informed.
And I wondered who sent him the letter, because he specifically mentions that Pycelle has not responded to his letter. So I wondered if maybe Yoren is still in King's Landing and, got news of this and sent a letter off to the Night's Watch.
Yeah, that's plausible, yeah. Because, there is no indication of from whom it came.
Yeah, they don't specify who sent the letter. The only thing they specify is that Pycelle hasn't responded to Mormont's letter yet. And actually, that's a concern Jon has, that without Barristan Selmy on the small council, that he's afraid that Mormont's letter won't be heeded. And the letter he's referring to, in case you may have forgotten, is the letter that Lord Commander Mormont promised Jon he would write to King's Landing, requesting that Ned Stark be allowed to take the Black and come join them at the wall.
Yes.
So you could see why Jon might be concerned that letter not be heeded. Yeah. And I also wondered if Lord Commander Mormont was a southern lord, if he was a lord from a southern house, if he might have more influence in King's Landing than being the former lord of Bear Island, such a small, remote island in the north. If he was the former lord of a Crown Lands or Reach or Starland's house,
Yeah, it may be less geographic and more to whom you originally owed your fealty, because he was a Stark man, so they have very little influence right now in King's Landing. If he had been from the Crownlands or the Stormlands and therefore a Baratheon loyalist, he might have had a more receptive audience down there. Yeah, it's definitely a thought.
Yes. And actually that makes me think about when he was complaining about about a boy being on the Iron Throne. Maybe he's thinking Ned was next in line to be King Regent for a while, and Ned being Ned Stark of the North and his brother being First Ranger, they might have been taken more seriously with Ned Stark.
They would have emptied every dungeon, not just the one in King's Landing.
Right.
Yeah. So Jon feels that Mormont's hiding information from him by not telling him about the news that Sam has given him, which is that Robb has called the banners together and they're marching south to fight the Lannisters in the Riverlands. Jon assumes that he's not being told because it's not his concern anymore, now that he's taken his vows. But I think it's the same coin, just a different side, just a different way of looking at it. We think it's because Mormont's concerned that Jon will get distracted and actually break his vows.
Exactly. If you recall, Tyrion asked for Jon to be one of the men that escorted him to Winterfell, and Mormont wouldn't allow that because he said his vows are too new. He wanted to sever that familial tie there a little more completely. So you could see that his fear of telling him of it, and it's actually kind of what's happened. Jon is he's feeling like a craven, that he's sitting up there at Castle Black doing nothing while Robb rides in defense of his father.
Yeah. And all of that is amplified by the fact that Jon is dreaming of rescuing Ned or fighting Ned. Not quite sure.
Depends on which dream, I guess. Yeah, he daydreams. I mean, he recalls that when he was young, he used to daydream about going to rescue his father, and his father saying, you've proven yourself as a true Stark, and rewarding him with ice. And then, Jon feels bad about that.
Right, because he knows that a bastard will never get precedence over the true-born son.
Right, yeah.
So the feeling bad, I don't know. I guess he has loyalty to Robb, and so he feels bad about having daydreams of usurping Robb.
Exactly, but it's a daydream, Yeah. It's not like he's plotting it. So right. I don't really think there's anything to feel too bad about it. But it's when he's given Longclaw that he starts having these thoughts about ice. And I think really it's starting to upset him, because later when he's leaving, and he should be in a really great mood. He got 2 fantastic pieces of news. He's been given this amazing Valyrian steel sword, and his arch nemesis, Alliser Thorne, has been sent 1,000 leagues away. But he says that his hand hurts, and that he can taste anger, and he can't can't exactly point out what he's angry about. I think he's angry because he was just given a great sword, but it's not the sword he wanted. He's angry because one, he feels angry at himself, like, you should be more happy about this. I mean, this is a great gift. Why are you upset? Why are you upset just because it's not the sword you wanted? And 2, because he's a bastard, he knows he'll never get the sword that he actually wants. I think that's why he's angry.
Yeah, and then compounded with the frustration of knowing that his family are in danger and are marshalling to war, and he can't be part of it.
Yeah.
Even though he's now wielding a sword that could make a difference.
Right. If his hand could heal well enough for him to wield it anyway.
Right. Yeah. One thing I noticed actually was there's quite a lot of sort of father-son interactions in this, although at no point does a father meet a son. There's lots of father-son talk, and particularly about the shame that sons can cause fathers, because Jeor Mormont talks about the shame that he felt because of Jorah's turning to slavery.
Right.
And then when Sam comes to Jon thinks he wants to look at the sword, but Sam's like, I've seen a Valyrian sword before. I have no interest in one.
Right, he was once heir to Heartsbane, the Tarly Valyrian steel sword.
And how he acted with the sword was one of the things that caused his father shame.
Right.
Because he was afraid of hurting someone with it because it was so dangerous. And then Jon and Ned. I mean, and Jon has always been an excellent son to Ned, but Jon is also the source of all of Ned's shame. I mean, Ned has very little to be ashamed of. He's so righteous and upstanding.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's got to weigh on Jon. He's got to realize it at some level that his presence brings shame in some level of disrepute to his father, but only in the eyes of people like his father.
Right. Yeah. Look at Robert Baratheon. He doesn't feel shame about his bastards everywhere.
True. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's only because of who his father is that he brings him shame, but it's still got to weigh on him a bit that he's the source of the shame. That's got to be a tough spot to be in.
Yeah. But anyway, I still think it's a little bit rash giving this sword away. I mean, it's been a family heirloom for hundreds of years, and I just I wonder if it should have like a rider on this, like say, after you finish using it, can you give it back to the Mormonts because they're going to need it?
When there's a Mormont heir who can wield this sword, could you please return it?
I mean, yeah, and that'll take a generation, by which time Jon will have died out. I mean, it should just be like, the bequeath of this sword is back to the Mormonts. That's all I'm saying.
That's the thing. It's like, I get that currently this sword brings shame to Jeor because of what his son Jorah did. But in 100 years, they're not going to remember what Jorah did, and they'll be like, what happened to our Valyrian steel sword? Oh, well, you see, I gave it to a guy because he did me a solid.
So one question I wanted to know what your thoughts on was, how do you think Alliser Thorne feels about being sent to King's Landing? Because Mormont says, when he tells Jon that it's happened, he says, I did it because it's an important mission, and I didn't want Thorne to feel like I was giving him a rebuke.
Right. Yeah, and that's basically my question to your question would be, is Thorne smart enough to realize he's being sent on an errand on Jon's behalf? If he is, then he's probably going to, not be thrilled with the idea.
Right. The wounds are going to fester.
Yes. If he's not smart enough to realize it, then, hey, who wouldn't want to go spend a little while in King's Landing versus being up here at Castle Black, Nice vacation.
Yeah.
But also,
I know what you're going to say.
Also, how Thorne is from the Crown Lands, and so I just wondered if he might linger or even possibly not return if he gets that close to his home.
His vows are not as fresh as Jon's.
Right.
He's a seasoned man of the Night's Watch. He'll be back.
He will.
Although the chief beheader of people who break their vows is currently in a dungeon under King's Landing, so maybe it's the time to abandon ship.
Yeah, if you're going to run now.
Yeah. So the boys are all excited about the sword. They all want to see it. There's some laughing and joking with Pip and Gren as usual, and they make Jon show them the sword. Jon's not really into it because he's got these conflicting feelings about the whole thing. He goes to his room. He shows Ghost the new direwolf head on the sword, and Ghost looks, like a dog would look at a sword. It's not food. Right. I don't care.
I think we forgot to mention that the pommel has been turned into a white wolf with garnets for his eyes, so it is modeled after Ghost himself.
There you go. And so while Ghost and Sam are in their room, while Ghost and Jon are in their room, Sam comes to visit, and he's looking a little bit embarrassed, and Jon figures out what it is. He tells him Maester Aemon wants to see him, and Jon's like, why does he want to see me? You told him that you told me what was in that letter, didn't you? And Sam was like, well, he sees things. He's like, yeah, he's blind, he doesn't see anything. So
there's other senses you can see with, Jon.
Yeah. John storms off, leaving Sam upset in his wake, not for the first time. And he goes to see Maester Aemon, who is feeding the crows raw meat, just like chum.
Yeah.
And just hurling this into the thing. So he gets rid of Clydas, who's helping Aemon, and John takes over the ghoulish duty of feeding the crows. Meanwhile, Maester Aemon talks him through. Basically, yet another pep talk for don't break your vows, you know?
Yeah, right, yeah.
We get it. Your loyalties are divided. That's reasonable. We don't say we don't wed and have children because that would be impossible to maintain our duty at all times.
Right.
But it doesn't stop us from being related to people. And when our relatives are suffering, our loyalties are divided.
Yeah, it's a natural... I think he's trying to say it's natural and it's painful. And you just have to deal with it. But he does say, I'm not going to tell you whether to stay or go. But he should, because if he goes, then he is a vow breaker, which is punished by death. So he probably should tell him to stay. I'm not going to tell you whether to stay or go. But if you go, you could very well have your head chopped off.
But have you ever seen one of those Valyrian steel blades that you're carrying there go through someone's neck? It's very, very painful looking. So I wondered about the symbolism of the feeding of the crows as they have this conversation. Because Aemon's talking about all of the sort of death and destruction he's had to sit passively through.
Right.
And meanwhile, the crows are being fed as crows eating typically means dead bodies, you know.
Right. This just struck me. I don't really have a particular take on it necessarily, but Jon says to Maester Aemon that Lord Commander Mormont's raven likes fruit and corn, and Aemon says that's rare. Ravens are carnivores. They like meat and they like the taste of blood. But I recall that the raven from Bran's dream kept asking him for corn.
Cool.
So
that's true. Yes, yeah.
Maybe there is maybe there's some sort of connection there. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it is Mormont's infernal raven.
Right.
In Bran's dream. But actually, I mean, if I remember rightly, Bran used to feed all the ravens of Winterfell corn, and they could say corn, in the same way that Mormonts
I
does.
definitely remember him bringing corn up onto the rooftops
when he was climbing.
I can't remember if they could say the word or not.
Could speak, right? Yeah.
But then Aemon asks him an interesting question. He says he's trying to drive home this point about family loyalties and your vows that you've taken. And he says, what would happen if your father had to choose between honor and his loved ones? And I thought, well, that's interesting timing for that question. Because about 1,000 leagues south...
We have direct evidence.
There's a guy sitting in a dungeon pondering that exact same dilemma.
Yeah. But Jon's answer is right. He would do the right thing.
Right, yeah.
Which isn't actually answering the question.
Yes.
But Aemon says, well, he's 1 in 10,000 if that's the truth. If that's right, he's 1 in 10,000.
Yeah, and then he gives some examples of the Night's Watch members staying true, and he mentions that during the Aegon's conquering, that the brother of Harren the Black, Harren Hoare, his brother was Lord Commander of the Night's Watch at the time, and he had 10,000 men at his call, and he didn't march. He stayed out of it. And then during the Andal invasion, the Night's Watch again stayed out of the the fighting between the First Men and the Andals, despite the fact that they were First Men and their families and their homes were being destroyed by the Andals. So he does give some pretty good evidence as to pretty good examples as to the Night's Watch staying out of the.
Of course, the one thing I would say there, I would say it is. In many ways, it's easier as the Lord Commander to keep everybody out than it is for an individual.
Yeah.
If you're the individual, it's just on you. if you're the Lord Commander, you say, all right, we're marching south to fight. Everyone will be like, wait a second.
This is your fight, not mine.
Up for. Exactly, yeah. But for an individual to sneak away to fight for his family would be...
yeah, I think you're right. I can definitely see that.
So, Aemon describes the... Well, he doesn't describe the 3 times his vows were tested. He just describes the last time, which was the ruin of his house, and the murder of his relatives. And these are his like great and great grand nieces and nephews, right? That's who we're talking about, basically.
Yeah, so he refers to the death of his brother's grandson, which would be Aerys. That would be Aegon the Fifth's grandson, which is Aerys, and his son, which would be Rhaegar, and the children.
And his children, yeah. So Aemon is to them, respectively, a great uncle, a great uncle, and a great uncle.
Sure. Yes, that sounds right.
Right. Yeah.
And like I said at the very beginning, I think he's both talking about Robert's Rebellion and some probably about Aerys' poor behavior as a lunatic. King.
Right, yeah.
But then
and as I said, also Rhaegar's behavior possibly.
Yeah, right, yes. But then the very next line he says, but they cut down his brother's poor grandson, son, and little children. So he used the term poor grandson when he's referring to Aerys.
Right. So maybe it's actually more Rhaegar than Aerys that he's talking about, because Aerys was considered to be mad, but did he do things publicly that would have made it to the wall that proved he was mad?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you would.
Everybody who was there at King's Landing was terrified of him and thought he was a nutcase and awful.
Yeah,
but firing Tywin Lannister as the Hand of the King doesn't seem like it's that crazy,
right? Yeah, his behavior was getting more and more bizarre, but I don't know that would have registered to his great uncle.
But Rhaegar kidnapping the betrothed of another lord and dishonoring his wife.
Yeah, right. That's
maybe
that might have been embarrassing. Bit of disgrace there.
One of the things that's interesting about this is Aemon is the owner of the Ravens, so Jon has people sort of protecting him from the news that the Ravens are bringing in, but Aemon didn't have that. Apart from perhaps the person reading the letter for him, who maybe was like, but does everybody know? Is it widely known who he is? No one had mentioned it to Jon previously.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I don't know.
So you can imagine
because he's a maester, he no longer technically has a last name. So, a lot of these folks will be young and probably most of them are uneducated. They probably have no idea who Maester Aemon truly is.
Yeah. So you can sort of imagine sort of Clydas or someone like that reading out these letters about the downfall of House Targaryen and laughing and joking kind of thing.
Maybe.
Meanwhile, Aemon is like,
Good point, yeah. And as a Targaryen, I was wondering how Aemon would feel about Ned and his role in Robert's Rebellion. I mean, we know, and he's got to know it at some level, that Ned is a very honorable, honest man, which you'd think would be traits that Aemon, as another honest and honorable man, would appreciate. But at the same time, he's a key factor in the downfall of his house.
Right, but again, then that goes back to what did he feel brought dishonor on his house? If it's Rhaegar's actions, he probably forgives Robert and Ned for what they did.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you know what? They brought this on themselves. Rhaegar brought this on our house by doing what he should not have done.
Yeah, I could see Aemon having that kind of philosophy on it. Yeah. I wondered if maybe Jon was starstruck because way back in Jon 1, he mentions that Daeron Targaryen, the young dragon, was his hero, and Daeron Targaryen is cousins with Aemon the Dragon Knight, and Aemon the Dragon Knight is Maester Aemon's namesake. So
right, but his he's an ancestor.
Yes,
right?
yes.
I mean, it's like a long way back, right.
But he was named after him anyway.
Yeah. So, to background, tell me what the other 2 tests of Maester Aemon were. I totally get the third one, but I don't know what the other 2 are.
All right. Well, I'm going to do that in a bit of a long-winded way. I'm going to take you through his life.
No, not you.
I wonder if the
audience will not believe that this is going to happen.
I wonder if the listeners have become as aware as you and Stacey are about my long-winded stories.
The few we have left, definitely. The ones we've lost, for sure.
So I'm just going to take you through Maester Aemon's life, and as we go through, we'll pick out what we think the other 2 issues might be. Okay, so Maester Aemon was born Aemon Targaryen, and he is the 3rd son of King Maekar Targaryen and his wife Diana Dane. And
hey, not incest.
Right, exactly, yeah. And he's the one, Aemon, is the one who as a boy gave his younger brother Aegon the nickname Egg. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah. So why would the son of a Targaryen prince become a maester? You ask? Or I ask?
I do, I ask.
Well, his uncle, King Daeron II, had 4 sons, and they all had sons. And King Daeron thought it was dangerous to have too many heirs. So at the ripe old age of about 9 or 10, Aemon was sent to the Citadel. And like Aemon says in this chapter, maesters give up their last names along with claims to lands and titles. So there goes any heir issues you have to worry about with Aemon. He spent the next 9 or 10 years forging his chain and completed his studies as a maester at age 19. After a string of unexpected deaths in the family, his father Maekar became king, and his father summoned Aemon and his brothers to court. However, Aemon was concerned that his presence on the small council would displace the current Grand Maester. So instead, Aemon went to Dragonstone to serve his oldest brother, Prince Daeron, until Daeron died of the pox. After his father Maekar's death in 233 AC, a great council was called to name an heir. As Aemon was a maester, the next man up was his younger brother Aegon. However, some of the lords thought Prince Aegon to be half a peasant, as he'd spent much of his life traveling Westeros with as a squire to a hedge knight. Here we get to a possible candidate for one of his vow tests that he mentioned.
Oh, yes, because he could give up his maesterhood to become king.
Well, exactly. There was a suggestion that Aemon could be released from his maester vows and named king. Aemon, of course, as we know now, refused the offer, and his brother became King Aegon V. And to prevent any further questions about Aemon's eligibility to rule, he doubled down on the vows and chose to join the Night's Watch. So now he's got 2 levels of vows to keep him tied down.
Belt and braces.
Yep. All this happened when he was about 35, so that feels like a solid candidate to me for the prime of his manhood test. He mentions one was when he was in his youth, one in the prime of his manhood, and one when he was an old man. So this one feels like the prime of his manhood. Age 35, that's about prime of your manhood right there. So the third test, as an old man, seems pretty obvious. Him hearing news of the fall of his house during Robert's Rebellion, or as he might refer to it, the War of the Usurper. As for the first, in his youth, that has not been revealed yet, as best I can tell. However, as he spent his youth studying to become a maester, I'm guessing it might have something to do with the love of a woman, because he mentions in this chapter, what's honor compared to a woman's love? What's duty against the feel of a newborn son in your arms, or the memory of a brother's smile? Which, to me, feels like pretty personal examples. But
yeah.
But none of them have been revealed yet, so these are just my guesses at what he's referring to.
Okay, is that literally true, those guesses, or do you actually know?
No, I don't know. These are just guesses.
Well, I have one other interpretation here then. Maybe when he was called to displace the Maester on the small council, he saw that as a sort of like a betrayal of his vows. That if he accepted that in some way, I don't know exactly what the Maester's vows are, but I wonder if displacing a more senior maester just because of your family name would be a betrayal of his vows in some way. So, and that would be when he was 19, which would be in his youth, you know.
Well, he was a little older than that because he didn't go directly. It didn't happen directly as he graduated from the Citadel. But still,
I see.
He would have been a young man. I don't know about necessarily the prime of his youth. I mean, right. I mean the prime of his manhood.
But I mean, to have vows, to have tests of your vows, you have to have made some vows. But I guess you make the vows as a maester quite young, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, people do go to the Citadel and then not finish their training and just go off and live their lives. So,
yeah.
But I feel like maybe while he was at the Citadel, maybe he fell in love with a woman and had to decide between pursuing his maester's chain or going off and, you know, marrying this woman and having children with her. Just totally a guess, just because I can't really think of another thing that would have happened in his youth. Maybe it's something that, you know, has nothing to do with any of that.
Yeah. So, well, that's very good. Now, I feel like the mystery is not solved, but at least we have plausible reasons why he said he was tested 3 times.
Right.
So, comparison with the television show, this one is very close in every facet. The first conversation with Mormont is there pretty much verbatim. He sent Alliser Thorne away with Jafar Flowers' hand. He gives him the reconstituted blade. Everything's the same. The only bit we don't really get is Jon's sort of like thoughts about conflict over accepting this sword when he dreamed of the other sword. So, you know, that's hard to put in a television show. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Does he act with more gratitude? Does he seem genuinely excited about being given Longclaw?
Yeah, well, less than excited, more sort of like gobsmacked. You know,
okay.
Wow, I don't deserve this. I think we just caught a bark from one of my dogs there. That'll just have to stay. It was Penny, because she's the one who barks. Yeah.
Pennies do that. I got elephants marching up above my head that the listeners are probably going to be like, what? Who's marching around during this podcast? It's my family.
And then the next scene, I have a bit of a complaint here because the boys, Pip and Gren and the others, they used to have a little bit more character. Now they just seem like this sort of characterless chorus of Jon cheerleaders.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. At least at the moment.
Yeah, but I mean, less so in the book than in the show. In the show, that seems to be all they do is just go, "Hey, Jon, you're awesome."
Right. Go, Jon. Yeah. Yay, Jon.
Yeah. And then everything in the conversation with Maester Aemon is basically there too.
Okay.
So I had a piece of pedantry, but I think you were going to refute my pedantry. So how did the gang know about the sword was going to be my pedantry? It felt like... But
Halder,
refute away.
Well, Jon says you guys knew, and Halder says he helped Pate carve the stone for the wolf's head, and that Sam bought the garnets for the wolf's eyes in Moletown. So,
okay,
they knew something was up anyway.
Allow me a rebuttal, if you will. Right, exactly. Just because he's been told to carve a wolf's head on a sword doesn't mean... Now Mormont has established himself very clearly as someone who does not embellish his commands with background information.
Right, yeah.
He did not say, carve a wolf's head onto that thing because I'm giving it as a present to Jon Snow.
Yeah.
He said, carve a wolf's head on that thing.
Yeah.
Make it good.
Yeah. So you're right. Yeah, you're right. They would have had to have made a leap of information there.
Right.
They would have had to said, that wolf looks exactly like Ghost. This sword is going to Jon.
It only looks exactly like Ghost because that's how he carved it. It couldn't look like anything. Maybe it was the third try. Mormont was like, could you make it look a little bit more like the one that pads around out here?
You have to have seen him. He's huge. Only wolf. The only wolf in the whole building.
What I want you to do is stop using your imagination. Just carve the one wolf that you can see. But, I mean, the whole place seems like... I mean, it's kind of funny, this chapter, in how much gossip there is going on.
Yeah, everybody... Like Mormont says, everybody knows everything around here.
Right. Because John says, "Oh, you've had a rave," and he's like, "Well, how do you know?"
Yeah.
All right, so we can wrap this up, right?
Yeah, we don't have any news and notes this week.
Not
that I can think of. Anything you think of?
Yeah. No.
All right. Then let's...
No, I'd have to pay attention to the wires. I rely on you for that.
Well, then let's move right on to conclusion.
Yeah. John's been forgiven, and he has a shiny new sword to prove it.
He does indeed, and he's got very mixed feelings about this sword. And on one hand, I get the issue that he's facing is not the sword he wanted, and the fact that he is who he is means he'll never have the sword that he wanted. But this is a nice sword too.
Yeah,
it's a very nice sword.
And he himself says, although I dreamt of the sword, I didn't really want it. I felt bad for dreaming about it.
Right? Yeah.
Well, now you got a replacement just as good.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not the only good news he got in this chapter. He got as he refers to it, even better news that Alliser Thorne is out of the picture, at least for the moment. So ding dong, the witch is dead.
Exactly, or gone to King's Landing with a hand.
Right.
Yeah.
One or the other.
Yeah, but I mean, that might allow him to sort of like rebuild his reputation and sort of like, he's going to have a period of time where everything he does doesn't get critiqued and laughed at by a senior person. So this should allow him to cement his position within the Night's Watch, I would assume.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Benjen Stark still missing, still a cause of concern.
Yeah, I think folks are, maybe except for Mormont. Mormont keeps sending people out looking for him, but I think even John's starting to accept the idea that he might be dead. Yeah.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean he's not coming back.
As we've learned. I think that's what Dywin and Hake were out there trying to determine, was if there was a white Benjen Stark wandering around out there.
So, and the other troubling news for John is that his brother Robb is riding south, and this news reached him despite the best efforts of Maester Aemon and Lord Commander Mormont to keep that news from John, because they don't want John to break his vows.
As news seems to do at the Night's Watch.
Exactly. You know what? Again, you got nothing else. Gossip will fill the time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's only so many chores you can do up there without a little entertainment, which is pretty much all they got is gossip. But yeah, John's feeling like he should be doing something, I think. He's feeling like his brother is riding south in defense of their father, and he's just sitting around at Castle Black doing nothing, and he feels like a coward because of it. Which is not true. He's taken a vow. There's nothing he can do. I'm sure if he hadn't taken a vow, if he'd been in Winterfell, and Robb said, "I'm calling the banners," John would said, "Let's do it. I'm here by your side."
If he was just if he was just shoveling the stables at I've forgotten where he is. He's at I keep saying the Wall.
Castle Black.
He's at Castle Black. If he was just shoveling the stables at Castle Black, you could sort of like have more sympathy for his desire to go and help. But all hell has broken loose.
Right.
I mean, the gates of hell have opened. The dead walk the earth. I mean, like you may have some significant responsibilities right where you are.
Yeah.
And long term, those might be more important than what's going on south of you.
Yeah, that's what Osha tried to tell Robb: is your fight's not to the south, your fight's to the north.
Right.
So.
Right. Indeed. So, but Aemon gives John just the right pep talk, including basically, "I know how you feel. I know you don't know that I know how you feel, but really I do know how you feel because I'm Aemon Targaryen."
Yeah. As you put it, mic drop. I mean, what more do you need to say after that? That's it.
Yeah.
Conversation over. If I can do it,
I'm going
you
nowhere.
Can do it.
Yeah. All right. Did you have one more thing to say there?
No, I was just going to say, it's cool that we now know who Aemon Targaryen, who Maester Aemon is. It's been a long wait for this to be revealed.
For those of us who knew already, yes.
So it's cool that it's out there.
I would like to say that I did remember.
All right.
This was not a surprise to me.
You dreamt it, in fact.
So, yeah. Cheeky. Alright, so as always, you can reach us at... This was another thing that I couldn't remember yesterday without it written down in front of me. I couldn't remember our email address.
It's right. You took about 3 tries at it. You got it right the first time, and then you second-guessed yourself and had to go back and do it a third time.
You can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com, and you can follow us on Twitter at @GhostHarrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Yes, I apologize. Our social media accounts I haven't been updating them as much as I used to. I've been a little busy, but I promise I will get back to it as soon as I can. Yes, and if you please would go out and give us a rate or a review. We would very much appreciate it. If you'd leave us a review, that would be amazing. If you don't have time, if you could just leave us a 5-star rate, we certainly would appreciate that very much as well.
All right, thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.